on to the second instalment of David Cameron's tell-all memoirs, which have appeared in the Sunday Times today. In it, the former Prime Minister says Boris Johnson was certain the Brexit side would lose the referendum and calls Michael Gove a foam-flecked Faragist. Joining us to discuss all the revelations is the Guardian and Observer journalist Sonia Sodha. Good morning to you,
Good morning.
Sonia. So today, an attack on Boris Johnson and his motivation for supporting Brexit.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it goes to show just how much bad blood there was between David Cameron, George Osborne, people on that side of the Conservative Party, and Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, who are at the head of the Leave campaign on the other. And one of the things that comes out of this morning's revelations is these promises that Michael Gove, who was actually really good friends with David Cameron heading into the referendum campaign in 2016, he said to David Cameron, I'm just going to make one or two speeches and be done with it. And David Cameron, in today's extract, describes how he felt when he sort of saw Michael Gove effectively kind of heading up the campaign, the sorts of posters that campaign was producing about, Turkey being imminently about to join the EU, incredible scaremongering, really dog whistling stuff. So I think the rancour that David Cameron feels towards his former colleagues is really quite obvious in this extract. But the thing I would say is that there's just, there hasn't been the sort of mea culpa that lots of people feel there should be in these memoirs. He doesn't say he made a massive mistake in holding the referendum, and I think it was a massive mistake. He thought it would sort of lance a boil, make this issue of divisive issue go away in the Tory party. Of course, it's made the whole thing a lot worse, and it's had terrible consequences for the country. So, it isn't the mea culpa that I think we should be expecting from our former Prime Minister.
Well, indeed. I mean, he says a referendum was inevitable. He effectively saying he didn't have any choice but to call it. He does express regrets, though, doesn't he, in today's extract, Sonia, about his own approach. You mentioned Turkish membership of the EU and how that became a part of the debate. And he says that he should have publicly announced that he would veto Turkish membership. But he talks about the dilemma being caught between being a campaigner on the one hand and the Prime Minister, that his hands were tied.
Absolutely. And I think one thing we know about David Cameron and his premiership is he put the interests of the Conservative Party ahead of the country. He says he had no choice but to call a referendum. Really, he felt he had no choice in terms of the Tory party and the interests of the Conservative Party, not the interests of the country. He didn't have to have a referendum. The EU, sure, it was a salient issue, but it wasn't kind of the top issue that voters were sort of saying that they really cared about. So, and I think, in the conduct of the Remain campaign as well, you're right. He says in the memoirs, he just didn't want to be openly attacking colleagues, some of whom were in the cabinet. And he talks about Priti, Patel, going out and making speeches effectively criticising the government of which he was part, their immigration policy, but saying, I just didn't feel like I could fire her because they'd make her a Brexit martyr. So again, I think it's an example of David Cameron putting the interests of his party, he didn't want to be attacking people on his own side, ahead of a really vigorous campaign to stay in the European Union. And that might be partly why the Remain campaign lost.
OK, Sonia Sodha, thanks very much. Good to hear from you this morning.